and welcome to the most excellent 80s movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian navigate their way through the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed with these, our modern adult eyes, to see how much compliance there is and or how well they hold up. This is Flight of the Navigator, a movie selection from 1986.
David, what time did you enter the woods?
Around 8 o'clock.
Then what happened?
Then I reached this cliff.
It's transmitting in alpha waves with complex frequency patterns in them.
I know I fell.
It's 1986, man. 8 years since that night. This is totally rad. I mean, you're my big little brother.
You should take a look at this. Where did this come from? From the mind of a 12-year-old boy?
He's hurt. He's calling me.
His voice keeps calling, saying something over and over and over, but I can't understand.
Help you. How?
Sit down, Navigator. You have the information I require to complete my mission. I have been sent from Phaelon to borrow samples of life from different galaxies for study. On this planet, I chose you.
Why me?
Why not?
Okay, which way is my daughter down?
I only know what's in your head. You don't know the way from your house to a 7-Eleven.
So much synthesizer, so much synth. Hi, I'm Chrissy Lenz, the comedian for this podcast and director at the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona. And here with me to navigate this movie is Nathan Blackwell, filmmaker of Squishy Studios.
Well, hi.
Was this a favorite of yours? Is this something you had watched a lot?
Yeah. First off, thanks. Glad to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is. I would not call this a childhood staple, although I totally did see it. I saw it. I remember seeing it in the theater, and I'm sure I probably caught it at least once or twice again on TV.
Yeah. I feel like it was on TV a lot, and or we were just like given this VHS tape. They were like, your children, take this VHS tape and just watch it. Like, I feel like it was just on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But as familiar as I thought I was with this movie, there was a lot I was watching and going like, oh, okay, this all makes sense now.
Mm-hmm.
So we start the movie with the first of several big UFO fake outs, right? So we see this like silver disc just like floating through the air of a city, and we're like, oh, okay, they're just going straight to the UFO business here. And it's quite a long time before they reveal that it's a fake out, it's a frisbee, and we are at the Frisbee Dog Championship.
Yeah, I wrote down, it's like, judging on the first 2 minutes, this movie is only about dogs.
Yeah. So because it's all about dogs. They're jumping, they're catching frisbees. We meet our hero David and his dog. And they're just like, we meet his family. They're out for a lovely Florida pre-4th of July celebration to watch their dogs catch frisbees. he fights a ton with his brother, but we like meet their like idyllic sort of life. His parents seem great. His house seems nice.
The ideal Southern Florida life.
Yes, yes, of course. So we know that his house is his house, and it's completely like you can't mistake it for any other house because it has these glass bricks that we were so obsessed with in the 80s and the
I
early
love those.
90s.
Yes, I love those. Yeah.
They're like we need to like people would go nuts for those today if we started like incorporating them into like ironically but unironically into architecture
Mhm.
now. Like people would lose their minds.
I bet they're really bad for like Phoenix style weather. I bet they let in so much heat.
Yeah, because they're just glass bricks. They're like maybe 8 by 8 square glass bricks that are hollow,
Hmm.
and they're just nuts. So we get a really nice intro to him and his family, right? Like they're getting ready to go to do their like evening firework boat extravaganza. Like we get a nice moment with the dad where he's like, "Here's how you talk to girls," and then he goes wandering in the forest to go pick up his brother from his brother's friend's
Hmm.
house. Is that what was happening?
Yeah, this movie is just only like 4 years after E.T.,
Yep.
and any movie takes like 1 or 2 years to make minimum, and so this is definitely has a lot of E.T. like DNA in it, like the kid who finds a friend and the scientists trying to unravel it in like the forest at night with a lot of like mist and backlighting and things like that.
Yeah, and
Um,
even the kid looks like the kid from ET. Like I've always
mhm,
thought, but there's the kid actor who plays ET, and then there's another actor who looks exactly like him.
mhm,
Do you know who I'm
mhm.
talking about? One of them is Henry Thomas, and one of them is not.
Yes.
And this kid is like falls into that category, and they all look like Peter Brady.
Mhm.
So it's just too much similarity for me. It's too confusing. There is a moment though where he's walking in the woods with his dog and he says, "I just don't know what I want out of life anymore." A-
Mhm.
As
Yeah.
but then he continues, "As a young dog, you may find that hard to understand." I'm just like, this is the best line of the whole movie.
Uh-huh.
Um we get our second UFO fake out. It's a water tower. We know this UFO thing is coming.
Yeah,
Um
there was also a blimp that startled everyone
yeah,
on the planet, yeah, during the
right.
dog.
Uh,
It's just everyone stops in their tracks and the shadow draws across and then all the adults like grab their kids and then they look up and it's a blimp.
and it's like, "Oh, as much as a blimp can sneak up on you, am I
Mhm.
right?"
Well, it was the 80s. I mean, blimps, man.
Ooh, I came out of nowhere. Um, and then like he just like sort of falls down. His brother sort of scares him, and he falls down, and then he gets up and walks back to his house, and there's a nice
Mhm.
older couple there in their like evening smoking jackets.
Mhm. Yeah, not to crib from a more successful podcast, but I do feel like there's an argument to be made that this might be a Jacob's ladder scenario. That he just
Yes.
falls, breaks his head, and then everything that takes place afterwards is completely just in his mind as he's dying from a coma.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you. Um
Because it's not like there was a bright light. He just kind of like falls and passes out in a misty pit,
yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I feel like we needed just some kind of extra little thing other than him passing out.
Yeah, like if we had seen the ship, like a glimpse of the ship.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring this up is because what has transpired in his unconsciousness is that he has actually been picked up by a spaceship and then deposited back 8 years later.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of confusion that we will get into later, which is that the eventual creature that operates the spaceship says that he drops everybody off back where they came from, but he didn't do that. with this poor kid. He's like,
Yeah.
oopsie doopsie. Oh, he got fried by some wires. And so, anyway, so the kid goes into his house and he's just like, you're not my mom. You're not my dad. But this is our distinct 90s glass brick. So this has to be my house. And luckily, he's in no danger. He just sinks to the floor. They're not afraid of him because he's just a white child. And he gets taken to the police station. And there's a fun bit of mystery because we as the audience aren't supposed to know yet that it's been 8 years or whatever. They're like, we're trying to figure out who you are, kiddo. This missing persons thing can't be right. And they drive him up to his parents' new house, and like the years have been hard.
Mom, why are you so old?
Dad, what happened to your hairline? Why is your skin so jaundiced and pale? Like, why don't you look happy at all? And we find out he's been missing for 8 years.
Yeah, and it's taken a toll on the
really
family.
has. Yes.
It's everyone is morose. Obviously their standard of living has decreased.
And yet the brother, who is now like 17 or so, he's like an older teen, like clearly has a sense of style that could not be dampered by his missing brother, because he is wearing very, very sassy 80s attire with like, big sleeve shirts with them rolled up. Like, he's looking good. He's taking care of himself. He was not maybe as depressed as the rest of his family at the loss of his brother.
Yeah, I feel like if there's a message in this movie, is that if you do lose a child, you just got to get over it.
Yeah.
Don't let it affect your life.
They're gonna come back in a spaceship. So he keeps saying too, like, I something is calling to me. Something is calling to me. And somehow he gets hooked up with the people who have found Dr. Faraday, who has found the space walnut elsewhere. So they've got these two separate parts: the kid who's been missing for 8 years and hasn't aged, and the space walnut.
Yeah, and I feel like the most interesting, distinctive part of this movie is actually the first part. I found that the most fascinating, probably as a kid, and then rewatching it now, is the idea of that you have missed 8 years of your life, and your parents are older, your younger brother is now older, and you're out of step. That was, to me, the novelty of this movie, rather than I've got a space buddy and let's go adventure, which is a little more generic, a little more kind of like in E.T.'s footsteps.
And you are absolutely right about that. And that's why we watch these movies as adults, because as a kid, I do not remember anything of this first part of the movie, except for that when he gets to NASA, they shower him with toys. Like, he has to, like, NASA. Oh, by the way, NASA has like the most branded cars, the most branded vans. Their building says NASA in like huge, huge letters. There's nothing secret or surreptitious or covert about this version of NASA.
And yet they have like terrible like employee hiring practices. Like Sarah Jessica Parker is just like full on, like has no loyalty to the organization. Know that the room that she's in is being monitored, has no problem like breaking what I assume is an NDA and
to deliver mail. So she's got like a K9 like from Doctor Who style robot, which is to deliver mail, and they're like just letting her go in top secret rooms. He's not getting any mail. He's not getting mail. He's only supposed to be there for 48 hours. He's got all of these toys, and I just always really coveted that moment where he's like, this is your room. Here's your, what does he call it? Remote control wand. And like every toy in the world. It just seemed like, yeah, I'll kick it at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, agree. It makes no sense at all that she's like just zipping and zapping and bebopping. And if they have a human delivering the mail, what is the purpose of a robot that would fit a human child inside it?
Well, so obviously the whole point of the robot is that he has to have a hollow compartment for a child to sneak out of so that he can escape NASA, you know?
Exactly.
And that, I mean, it makes sense. Like, how like that she is kind of shepherding this robot. It's probably early days. It's kind of like how the Waymo, like, self-driving cars have a human in front just in case, you
Hmm.
know? It's probably she's there to kind of supervise, but it's interesting, like different styles of movie, different types of movies, different genres, and then also by the era, like if this movie was made today, there would be far more human complexity. Back then, in terms of like, like the security guards in this movie are bozos who are gambling, and then she is like, has no problem helping him out and to escape immediately. I feel like if it was made today, just with us used to these, like, much more complicated, complex, like, TV shows and movies,
Hmm.
that we would get a lot more mileage out of her juggling the decision of, do I say I'm going to help him, and then it shows her talking to her bosses. It's like, yes, he's trying to do this or whatever. It's just like the roles that everyone plays in this movie, besides being, a kids movie, is just so straightforward,
Yeah, it really
and
is. There's
it's
no
like
mystery.
and I don't think it's entirely at fault of the 80s, because I felt like ET with their scientists had a lot more complexity in terms of, yes, we're kind of the bad guys, but yet we are experiencing this wonder as well.
Hmm.
I never, with the scientist in this movie, I never felt um that they had any empathy for the kid in this movie, or that I really tapped into any of the point of view of their wonder for. I mean, you kind of get a little bit of their wonder for the spaceship, but I never felt like there was any empathy that the scientists had for the kid.
Yeah. Well, and they also don't like explore how it has impacted his family. I mean, they
Mhm.
touch on it with the brother, but not very much. But I mean, by this time they've just gotten him back, and already like they're looking better. Like the mom's doing her hair again, um,
Mhm.
and they're all like being watched. There's this funny moment where he calls home to like tell his brother that he's gonna do something. This is later, and he's like, "You need to show me where the house is," because kid doesn't know where anything is. Um, the mom's like, "Oh, keep the line free, Jeff. David might call," and this is her subterfuge. But she's already looking better. Like she's doing her hair now. She's got her son back, which made me think like at the end when he does choose to like ditch this timeline and go back to his original timeline, does that mean that there's a universe where this mom was then like, wait, what? Like she just has to go on and be like, no, my son's alive. He's just in space now,
Mhm.
and I don't get him back. Or did that timeline end and they all
Yeah,
poofed into nothing?
I think this is way before like multiple timelines. I think they just see this as a very linear, kind of Back to the Future one sort of thing, to where, the people stop existing after he goes back, and then the timeline gets rewritten at that point.
Okay, all
Is
right.
pre multiverse theory in terms of pop culture.
Yeah, there's no quantum
Yeah.
foam in this world. So yeah, you're right though. They completely ignore him when they're like discovering that he has all these star charts and all of this like information in his brain. They're completely ignoring him when he's like, excuse me, what the hell? I've never been to Phalon. I don't know what this is." They're completely ignoring him.
Mhm.
But they find that he's got all these like star charts stored in his brain.
hmm And to be fair, like he is emotionally volatile.
Yeah.
Like I want to go home. I want to do. It's just these extremes of emotional outbursts.
Which is like he's a 12-year-old kid. Like this is my son's age. Like if my son like
hmm
disappeared and came back and I looked like shit and then some doctors were like trying to dig things out of his brain, like I can imagine he'd be screaming a lot.
hmm
Um so Sarah Jessica Parker does help him escape and he gets called to the ship, right? He's called to it. It's shiny, it's a walnut. He knows how to get in. Um
hmm
and then we hear the ship talk and we see the ship's little face. And
Yeah.
it's like a giant light bulb with handles. It
Mm.
looks exactly like the thing the dentist holds over your face.
Mm.
That's what it looks like, but it has a
Mhm.
personality and it has the personality of Paul Rubens.
Right.
And at first he's like, "You are the navigator," like, and it's very like how.
Cold and logical.
Yeah. Compliance, right? That's his catchphrase. Compliance. This is a first class maneuver. Uh this is a third class maneuver. And it wants the star charts in his head.
And how did it get into his head again?
So he explains that what happened was that when he picked up David, they were just experimenting. He was like, I don't know. I thought, wouldn't it be crazy if I put all this information into your head? You only use 20% of your head. So the
Right.
aliens were like, maybe we can use you like a flash drive. And we'll just store, like Johnny Mnemonic style. We'll just
Right.
store this in the other, 90% of your brain, and we'll see what happens.
I would have to say my least favorite like scientific trope is like, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. It's like, oh, it's like what happens to the other 90%? And it's used as a device to like, to do so much stuff in science fiction.
Yeah.
And it's so untrue. you
Mhm.
know? It's just super it just annoys me
Have you
to no
seen
end.
did you see the movie Lost City that recently came out with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum and Dan
Mhm.
Radcliffe?
Mhm.
The best part of the funniest moment to me was when like Brad Pitt, who spoiler for the film The Lost City, sorry everyone, gets shot in the head, but he comes back to life. He's like, "Well, we only use 10% of our brains, so I just switched to a different 10%."
Oh boy.
I loved that movie. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so he was like, we wanted to see what happened and your brain leaked and that's what happened. And then the starship person was like got caught in power lines and that's why he got stranded on Earth. So now he needs to get the star charts back out of David's brain in order to get himself back to Phalon and to return all the little creatures back to their homes.
Mhm.
So it scans his brain and like can happen when you plug in a new USB device to your computer, it erases the brain and personality or whatever of the spaceship and imprints David's personality onto that. And like we've already had some hijinks up to this point. They've shot up into the sky, they've shot into a field of clouds, they've been under the sea. They have this like slightly antagonistic relationship, but then immediately as soon as he scans David's brain, we get Pee Wee Herman.
Mhm. Yeah. And boy, like kids, we make fun of it like anything silly appeals to kids, and I remember being really into just anyone who was silly
Yeah,
as a kid, like, oh my god, this is so cool, like he's silly, it's like I remember like in Krull there was like this the silly sorcerer, who kept making mistakes and rewatching it just being it so grown worthy, but I remember it being like the best thing as a kid, you
agreed.
know.
And Pee Wee Herman is the silliest of all. He's the silliest there is, and so in this movie, he's not credited as either, as Paul Rubens. He's credited as Paul Mall because he said he wanted it to be mysterious who the voice of the spaceship is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not mysterious. As soon as you go, ha ha, anyone who's
Mm-hmm.
ever heard of Pee Wee Herman knows exactly who the voice is.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just they're this sort of goof troop team where the spaceship doesn't know how to get home. The kid doesn't know how to get home. And they just are like haphazardly smashing along the planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
We find all these creatures. So there's all these like creatures that he has. We get a little moment of like some fun puppets. And of course, a cute, marketable, pocket sized creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who is the last of his kind, and he really treats it roughly.
He does. He just shoves it into his backpack.
Of all the characters in the movie, he's the one that I had the most empathy for. Like
Yeah.
he just looked cute and innocent, and just wanted to be part of the gang. And he gets stepped on and like put in his bag and like smushed accidentally.
Smushed for
Yeah.
sure. But then there's just sort of nonsense. They like, oops, we're in Tokyo. Oops, we're in California. Oops, we're in a field where they like fat shame a guy who's like, it was like so shocked by that moment. They arrive at a gas station to like ask directions, and it's called Big Al's like alligator hut or whatever. So they're like, well, we must be in Florida. And Big Al is like, a large man who's just standing there aghast and agog because a spaceship has just landed in his
Mm-hmm.
front yard. And immediately the Max, which is the name of the Pee Wee Herman dental light spaceship guy, is like, too many Twinkies, oink oink, Big Al. It's like, wow, so you learned to be a douchebag? Like, what?
Thanks to humanity.
Yeah, you learn to be petty and shitty. And
Yes.
but there is a cute part. Like, I always liked the family that's there, like just at the same time, and they're like, okay, get in the picture. The dad's talking to Big Al, like, what's it cost to make something like that float? It's pretty, like, I thought that family was cute.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they get back in the thing and fly away, and the family's like, what? And Big Al's like, he needed to phone home.
Which was pretty good.
Yeah, there is a dance break because they hear music while they're trying to get directions, and so they do like a Beach Boys dance break, which, like,
Mm-hmm.
of all the music for him to choose as a kid from the 70s, he likes the Beach Boys.
It was pretty popular.
Okay.
I remember being excited about the Beach Boys in the 80s.
Okay. Yeah, Kokomo was a very popular song. So then he has like asked his family to light up the house with fireworks so that he can find it, because he can't find it. He doesn't know where they live, and he's 12, so he doesn't know directions. So he gets his brother to set off a bunch of fireworks on the roof. They do. He finds them, and then he's like, you know what? Second thought, I need to go back to 1978. Nathan, do you remember why it was dangerous to go back to 1978? Because I sure don't.
Yeah, he said, I don't think your species can survive it.
Okay.
And then it just becomes, no, I need to go back. And that's the whole argument, because he's getting ready. It looks like he's ready to come home and assimilate into his new life. And then it's almost like it was a reshoot. Like, he just stops and says, no, I need to go back. And then they start up the ship, it flies off, and then they start the process of time travel. And yeah, that's and luckily it worked out, because that was the only obstacle.
Yeah. Well, and it, perhaps it would have been more interesting if he had to like learn to exist in a world where he just like, like got blipped out of 8 years of his life. Like, that doesn't mean he can't have a happy life or whatever.
Yeah.
He just leaves his family standing there.
His friends sucked anyway. Like, it's not really it wasn't a huge loss.
You can meet new people. Yeah. I mean, imagine the discoveries, like the new fun stuff you would have.
Yeah. But it's very much kind of like how do you end the movie otherwise? Like, you want there to be like a big effects. You want them to roll the dice. You want there to be like a big effects climax and then a reveal and then like, oh, everything turned out okay.
And that's exactly what happens. Like they fly through this very
Yeah.
like 80s trapper keeper landscape, and that's it. He comes home, like there's his family, they're like, get in the boat, it's fireworks time, and he's like, yay. Although I do think in the alternate reality, like NASA would have kidnapped him for sure and like cracked open his skull and murdered him.
Oh yeah, for
There's no way
sure.
that wasn't happening. But he's like back in his like life. He says goodbye to Pee Wee Herman, and like, but he kept the cute little squirrel creature.
Yeah.
And there's a part where he's like, he's in the boat and he's like, I love you, Mom. And she's like, ew, ew, what's happened to you? We're not that kind of family, son. We don't tell each other we love each other. And then he tells his brother he loves him, and they're like, whoa, ew, something's wrong with David.
And he's like, damn it was okay in the 80s.
Yep, and that's Flight of the Navigator. It was, a Disney
Oh.
80s thing.
It's interesting. The movie was actually independent. It was an independent movie, and it doesn't really surprise me. Like there aren't like a lot of stars. It is kind of a little in the shadow of other types of movies. Like you can see it'd be easier to kind of fundraise for. Kind of reminds me of a Never Ending Story in that
Yep.
way, which was like German based. They did make this in America. I think it was partly Norwegian financing.
Yes.
But they eventually sold it to Disney.
Yep.
And Disney released it. And it totally works in Disney's wheelhouse for sure. It doesn't stand it like it doesn't have like a foreign film made for America really kind of feeling. It's just that,
No, but it has that same like artificial aftertaste like that a Mac and Me has. Where it's like, oh, it doesn't taste as good as Kraft macaroni and cheese. So you're like,
right.
this
It doesn't taste as familiar maybe. Yeah.
It's like the RC cola of this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about it that doesn't quite sit on the palate exactly as nicely. Even as an ET, which felt like a real movie, and this felt like a TV movie. But they say that Disney kept the spaceship and it's like boneyard for a long time, and then like repurposed it into the top of a drink, like caddy, like a drink section in the middle of the thing. There have been a million attempts to reboot this, and it's happening again. It's happening again. They're going to reboot it with Bryce Dallas Howard directing a gender swapped version, which like I'm interested. Like, does it take place in
I hope
times?
It's a gender swap is not enough newness to take on the story again. You would need to kind of like develop in a certain direction something else, it needs one more thing, or to lean in harder on something that exists already.
Right. Agree.
Like it's already got two big things going on for it, like being the boy out of time, and then being the brain, the navigator for this ship, and you just kind of lean in a little harder into one of those other two ideas.
Well, but I have a feeling though that the path of least resistance, the easiest thing to do is to like try and capture the audience of 80s moms like me, and have it be like, oh, I'm teaching a spaceship to 2022 slang, and or night I'm teaching it 90s slang because I'm a 90s kid who ended up in the 2000s or whatever. Wait, what was 8 years ago from humans. Now? Yeah.
What? Yeah. Was that pre-COVID? I can't remember. Yeah. 2016. It doesn't even seem like it was any different than now.
Yeah, that's true.
It's so funny, like just in terms of time, like watching these movies, like I can tell a distinct difference between 83 and 86 in terms of watching these movies. In terms of like the storytelling and the technology, but I cannot tell you the difference between 2022 and 2016.
Yeah.
Like I just don't have the perspective on it.
That's true. And I can tell the difference between the 90s and the 2000s. I can tell the difference between the early 2000s and the late 2000s. But like once you get past 2010, like I don't feel like anything is distinct. And I'm sure that that's not true. And it's just like my 40-year-old brain can't take in subtlety anymore. I don't know.
That's why it takes like 20-25 years to have perspective on a decade.
Yeah.
That then you start some things that you start boxing, and not only are it's like, oh my god, those hairs, the hairstyle is now so different from our own, but you also start boxing things into the 80s, which also probably existed in some degree in the 70s or the 90s.
Of course.
It's like, oh, that's so 80s. Well, it was also, people wore those shirts.
It's true.
Before
And
or after.
there is a whole like series of marketing things that are like, oh, this is this is for your 80s party, and they'll put in like PlayStation controllers and Game Boys, and I'm like, get your Game Boy out of here. That was like 1989, and so we didn't have those until the 90s.
Yeah, I didn't have one till like 93 or something like that, or 94. Yeah.
And certainly not a PlayStation controller. Like we didn't like there was a Sega Genesis. We didn't have that.
It had to be at least 4 years old for us to have something like that.
Right.
Like we didn't we didn't have like a VCR until 87.
Right.
Or 88,
I think that the people who are making these things don't know the difference between like an old school Nintendo controller that's square and terrible and like, the fancy round things that we eventually got. So on a scale of 1, I didn't even know, one little creature who can't go back to his home world, who now you own, to 10 cute little space creatures that you now have as
Pretty
a pet.
cute.
What's how many cute space creatures?
I think I'm gonna have to give it a 6 space creatures, which both seems low and both seems high. Like it's, like I enjoyed this movie as a youngin' more than a 6, and probably experienced it more as a 5 as an adult, and so I'm kind of splitting the difference.
I hear you. Yeah, I give it slightly more. I give it a 6.5 because it's not quite a 7. 7 is mannequin. Like this is a joy. This is a pleasure. I want to show this to everyone ever and be like, can you believe this? Look at it.
Right. This was, I didn't enjoy it, but I must give it respect.
Yeah. But I did, like, I felt like it went down easy. Like, I felt like it was easy to watch. It was easy to, like, have on.
Yeah.
And as opposed to the movie that we're doing next, which felt like interminable and torturous. This was easy peasy. And, like, my kids have seen it and they're just like, yeah, take it or leave it. So I give it slightly more than you. I give it a 6.5. Because I thought it was fun, and I thought that the 80s graphics and stuff were cute and cozy.
Yeah, and we didn't even really talk about like the visual effects. Like this was kind of like a very early version of like the T1000 like liquid metal VFX, which was really novel at the time. It was a big deal, like they did a really cool job with the kind of like liquid metal style spaceship on this.
Yeah,
the idea they could shift forms, and that was really cool, and they definitely deserve props for it.
Yes, I did think that was very cool. I thought the practical effects were really neat too. I really liked that we had some Muppets. Give me some practical effect Muppets in there just as like a palate cleanser. I thought they were very cute. I love the inside of the ship, which was practical and like all built out of aluminum. I thought it was very neat. And even though I couldn't get over the fact that the face of the thing looked like the dentist light, I thought it was fun character. Like, because it was the voice of Pee Wee Herman, I immediately wanted to like it. So I thought it was, for all of those reasons, I think it's a fun watch. And I think it would be a fun, like, if you were to, like, put this up and be like, oh, Flight of the Navigator movie party, like, wear your NASA hat and come on down, like I think people would have a fun time because it's just easy. There's nothing challenging about this movie.
It's true. I like your RC Cola comment. I feel like that's the most apt for this experience, and you can definitely have a good time. It's like a daytime watch. I wouldn't put it at as the headliner of the act, but it's a good time.
Yeah. Agreed. So, do you have a deep cut recommendation? I sort of have one.
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So I was sort of struck by the like relationship between the like robotic entity, the time dilation, and it reminded me of Lightyear. So even though the connections are very like tangential, what better way to have a deep cut recommendation? But I think if you like Flight of the Navigator and you like not being that challenged and just enjoying a spaceship and robots and time dilation, then go see Lightyear. I really enjoyed it. And I think that it's great for adults and kids. And they do mention Pixar in the movie. They go something about the Pixar system. And so go see Pixar's Lightyear. It's a great movie.
Well, I'm grasping at straws here, and for a recommendation, I was trying to do I go for cute alien creature? Do I go for
Paul Rubens, maybe?
Paul Rubin? I think ultimately, like the thing that is most distinctive, it's not obviously like the poster. The distinction on the poster or anything like that, but it's the whole time dilation. Like he time traveled not because they went through and got some space whales and went around the sun. Like the ship like literally went nearly the speed of light, and then basically just by traveling it was time dilation, and they advanced 8 years in the future. Which the adult version of that is Interstellar. That's like that to me that's the most interesting, compelling movie that has kind of broached the idea that time is relative depending on the concept of time dilation. In Interstellar, they go down to a planet that is orbiting a black hole, and so the time dilation is so severe that they go down for like an hour or so, and it's years. It's like 26 years or something like that. I'm getting all these numbers incorrect, but the whole idea is that the relative between the speed of light affects how we experience time. And so basically Matthew McConaughey, his daughter is like 16, and he goes down to the planet, comes back, and his daughter is older than him.
Yikes.
Yeah, and so that is, and there's no way to get that back, and so, and then what he watches the logs of her now his age, and he is just the tears stream down. And so just on the subject of that, if this movie, if Flight of the Navigators got you so excited about time dilation, that Interstellar is the perfect deep cut recommendation.
Oof. Yeah, you're describing the one where like whereas Flight of the Navigator didn't delve into any of the big prickly questions that it put forward, Interstellar is just those prickly questions.
It is making a meal.
Yeah. Well, I think that was great. An excellent recommendation. Where can people, I'm assuming that someone is here for the very first time and doesn't know where they can find Nathan Blackwell and support his art, where should they go?
So our films and other projects are on squishystudios.com, a super manly production company name, but one that I'm sticking with. Squishystudios.com. You can see most everything we've done on YouTube under Squishy Studios as well, including our web series Voyage Trekkers and our feature film, The Last Movie Ever Made. We're doing a poor job of putting stuff like that on the website, but the Facebooks and the Instagrams have updates on the project.
Excellent. And you can find me on the interwebs at Most Excellent Chrissy and Most Excellent Pod. Please like us on Instagram and Facebook. Find us, share us with a friend. It really, really is the most helpful thing you can do. If you enjoy us, we're just two crazy kids out here trying to make it happen. So help us out. Throw us a 5-star review. Throw us a like on those Instagrams. It really does make a difference. And this past month, we've had the most listens we've ever had in a single month. So you're doing it, kids. Please continue helping us out.
Thank you for your support. Thank you for hanging out with us. We get no money making this podcast. It's just something that we do for fun, and we're glad that other people have fun listening.
Exactly. So on that note, with our appreciation to you, make sure that when you're out there in the world, you remember the Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast motto: please be excellent to each other, and party on, dudes.